Hi, good morning, Anthony. Welcome to our contractor-related chat. You're our first guest, and the reason that I wanted to invite you is because we're good friends for a long time, and also you're a highly experienced contractor, knowing a lot about contracting in Ireland and the UK. And it's always good to get the insights of somebody who's coming from a situation like you. So, look, first of all, like it would be great maybe if we could, get some background from yourself, where you're from,
Sure. I mean,
and
I suppose, Kev, you and I met each other way back when we were both working at Citco, which is what, 17, 18 years ago now. And that was my first contract job in Ireland. But I'd already contracted in England before, and I've contracted in England since, like you say. So I've had a foot in both camps. So it's quite interesting to see the differences between the Irish contract and UK contract markets. So it's good to join you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You're very welcome. So the thing is like it's always good to find out give people a bit of background about you. So can you let people know where you're from, and before you got into contracting, a bit of a high level about what you did, a couple of career things before you got into contracting?
Sure. So basically, I did a lot of things. As you can probably tell from the accent, I'm from the northeast of England. So I was up there for quite a long time, doing bit jobs really, because the economic market was really poor when I started up in northeast. There was actually 18% employment. So it was really hard for anybody to get a job. And I actually was working 3 part-time jobs initially in order to make ends meet, because there were no full-time jobs. But I left the northeast when I joined the army. I served in the army in Germany for 3.5 years, and then came back to the UK. And I came back and I started working, when I left the army, I started working for Ross Perot Systems, working at UBS. And that was my first real job in finance. And I worked there as strategic business analyst for their strategic business unit, and basically technical analyst halfway between finance and business, and basically creating things like recharge mechanisms and things like that. So a lot of finance related things, but all technical solutions. I was there until we were actually so successful that the role actually wound up, because we managed to build a system that looked after itself. So I got made redundant from there, and I came over to Ireland to work for Citco, and that's how I met you. And I was at Citco for almost 7 years as a contractor.
Just as a matter of interest, I worked in Texas myself, and I worked with a lot of guys who worked with Ross Perot. So working for Perot Systems, what did you like about it? What was it that really, made you get up in the morning, go in there? Do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it was very much a meritocracy. I mean, you didn't look at what certificates and things like you had, which was helpful for me because I don't have a degree. So I've basically been either self-schooled or worked on the job and learnt on the job. So, I'm a typical example of what most people would say is something very rare nowadays, in that I've been doing this job for 25, 30 years almost. And what they said was, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. And thankfully I was right next to my boss. So I sat right opposite my boss, and we had good conversations every day, and we were always thinking on our feet of what the problems were, because we were going through a huge strategic change at UBS. This is where the ITI function came out in, which encompassed every business stream. And that's when things like Payne Weber and all those strategic changes were happening. And we were building a global mechanism for recharging costs and flattening out the charges. And in the time that I was there, we got from not knowing what we were going to pay to within 50k invoice to each business stream every month. And that was, a really good for them. They could say, well, what's the cost of adding an extra 2 people or getting rid of 3 people? How does that affect our costs? And we could project that. So basically what we did was created a mechanism to accrue and prepay invoices so that we could flatten out that curve to the business, so they didn't have any nasty shocks during the year.
That's in terms of Perot and working there, One of the guys that I worked with in Texas, he got a chance to ask Ross Perot one question one time, and he said, "Mr. Perot, like, what makes you so successful?" And his answer was, "I surround myself with people who are better than I am." And I wonder, did you experience working with like very high caliber people in Perot systems? It kind of sounds like you did.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it was great because you were bouncing ideas off other people, so you saw things from other people's perspectives. Like I say, yes, it was UBS, but we had people that were ex-military working on the submarine plants in the US and all sorts of things. And different ways, different perspectives really help trying to get a robust solution for problems.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned submarines, like the creation of nuclear submarines in the US. That was the genesis of the Gantt chart. And I remember when you and I worked in Cisco, we often had to look at Gantt charts. Probably,
yes.
That's probably we're both wearing glasses now because we had to look at them so much. But anyway, yeah. So in terms of that role, was that your first contracting role, Anthony? Or was it like when did you first experience going contracting from like what you call a perm type role?
So my first contract role was actually before I joined the army, and it was basically like the classic industrial piecemeal kind of role, where I was working in the industry, and that was a very, very different kind of contracting than what we'd say typically on a finance side of things, where there was a huge amount of, oh, well, that isn't perfectly right, we're going to claw back that cost. So that's the old classic way that contractors worked way back when. But actually, my first real contract role, as we would call it today, was actually when I went to Citco with you guys. And as you know, I came in to do from Greenfield, basically to build up their MI reporting, because there wasn't anything when I came there. It actually started with let's talk about what you need requirements wise, and phase one will do was what was said to me. Literally didn't know what they didn't know, and it was good in so many ways because it was a greenfield site, as I say. Nothing had been set in stone. There was huge amounts to win. Everything was a win. Everything was, oh, we've never done that before. So initially, the relationship managers would take 30 days to give a statement to a client as to where they stood. And by the time I left, every single night we were restating every single position for the 250 billion assets under custody. So, it was a huge amount of change, strategic change for the business,
Well, yeah, I mean, like if somebody like didn't know anything about what you did, I would just describe what you did at that stage was you took very unorganized information and you turned it into very understandable and usable data, which is like a really, really hard thing to do. So you had this really, really hard job. I know that we had I think we had a good time working. We made a good experience out of it. You know what I mean? I think work should always be fun, and we tried to in the trenches try to always have get work done, but enjoy while we did it. But you were also then juggling contracting experience with it and trying to make sure that contracting worked for you while you did it. So how did you manage to do that?
Well, I had a very good accountant at the time. I've got to say, one of the things you've got to have as a good accountant when you actually start doing this kind of stuff, because they'll tell you the catch outs, which is things like holding the second year's worth of tax. So the first tax year, you've got 2 years of tax you've got to pay. Those kind of things that people don't consider, and often people become overstretched in their first year and realise that only too late that they're in problems. And they have to scrabble around trying to make ends meet for the next year to try and get on top of things. So those kind of things, that's down to the accountants to be able to share that information and that knowledge. And that's very specific to Ireland, that legislation. It doesn't work, it doesn't happen everywhere else. Most places just you pay your tax and arrears and that's it. So those kind of things are differences that would catch people out.
So, like, why did you want to have that experience of contracting as opposed to maintain it as a permanent at that stage? Like, what were the choices?
Actually, it wasn't a case of a choice. It was sort of I fell into it. It was between Chris Scott and yourself. Chris said, oh, you could do this analysis. You've just been laid off from UBS now because you've literally the function ceases to exist because it's been absorbed into another function, and 35 people were laid off at the same time. And it says, well, you can do this reporting malarkey, can't you? Yeah. Would you come over for a couple of months to do some analysis? And that's how it started. And it was a case of, well, you did so well. Would you like to stay on? And they offered me a renewal on the contract. You know, from what was a 3-month just plugging a gap, became something far more permanent. As you know, I was there for sort of almost 7 years. So
Yeah.
that's a big deal, you know.
That's tremendous. I mean, it was really good. But I mean, your experience is not unlike a lot of people. Like it's some people consciously decide that, well, I'm going to move out of what I'm doing because I have so much experience, and I go on a contract, and I'm going to try and make more money, and I'm going to have greater flexibility in terms of what I'm doing. We see a lot of people that, like, effectively their job finishes up or it's redundant or whatever, you know, and then they're looking at this, and contracting presents itself. So, like, your experience is in line with a lot of people, and more and more, I think, as well, people are seeing this. You know, they're made redundant from a job. They're looking around, and maybe contracting has been on their mind, but an opportunity comes up and they take it.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, when you've got nothing to lose, you've got nothing to lose when you're in that situation, which is why people often make that first step, and then they find out it works for them. Don't forget, I was contracting since then. I've been contracting for another 4 or 5 years. I contracted when I got back to the UK, and that was the same. Is that, you know, the work isn't what you thought it was going to be. You know, it wasn't how it was pertained, which sometimes gets you in a permanent role. You take a role thinking it's going to be a certain way. Management might change, and then the culture changes, or whatever it happens to be. But there are reasons why you feel locked into that. Whereas a contract, you just say, well, actually, I'm not going to renew beyond this point because, you know, let's just agree to disagree on this approach. We think that, you know, you think this and I think that, and technically I'm responsible. So let's just agree to disagree beyond this certain point, for example. You know, so it gives you the flexibility that the way you work doesn't, you know, we're all different. We all have different cultures. We all fit differently. And when you're in a place where you fit with people, you stay. And sometimes you'll just do a short term and then move on. Equally, some of the roles that I've come in are quite strategic, and they're just to fix a particular problem. So you're only there for 6 months, and you know you don't expect there to be a renewal. You know, you're delivering this particular thing, and that's what you're there for. And that could be 6 months, and it might get renewed. It may not, depending on the project as a whole. You know. Yeah,
that's interesting. I suppose the next major question that I have for you is, what are you doing now? But what would be interesting is to hear some of the highlights that led you up now between the Citgo experience and your present role. If you could start off with that and then explain what you're doing now.
Okay, so highlights, I suppose. From Citgo, I went back to the UK and I worked for Glencore, which was a major strategic working on their messaging systems for 5 of their trading systems. It was basically changing from Coda to SAP. And it was a fundamental change to the way that their trading systems worked, because they wanted live, real-time transactional data going into SAP. So I worked quite closely with the fund managers and the accountants to make sure that a single transaction was creating all the correct accruals and reversal positions. And, you know, it wasn't just about buying and selling commodities. It was also things like supply chain, where you were you got 30 million barrels of oil, but you needed to make sure there was actually contracted in. You had a mechanism to get that in a boat, to get that from Kuwait to wherever, or, you know, wherever it happened to be, from one place to another, and all the arbitrage about, oh, well, it's going to stay in, it's staying in port for so long. If it goes beyond that point, it starts costing money, and you have to accrue for that cost and then claw it back at the end. And you're also buying commodities 5 years in advance. So you're buying barrels of oil thinking what they are now, and you're buying it in 5 years' time. So, you know, that whole logistics chain, just in time, everything there, I learned a huge amount when I was there. And live messaging, which I'd never done before, other than a small amount. But at Citgo, I'd never done really live messaging. And that was a big thing, because we were talking 30,000, 40,000 transactions a day which were trading, buying and selling stuff. And then so I went from there really to, I think the next one would be Barclays. And Barclays, it was the big initiative to change from a cost managed system to a service managed way of looking at things. And there was a £137 million cost saving that was driven by changing to service driven analysis. So you were doing things through the lens of service, front to back process, rather than looking at things purely from an economics point of view. And they actually saved 137 million in that time just by restructuring the business and changing things. So I was in a lot of that reporting was something that I was working on, you know.
And was that Barclays Bank or was that Barclays Capital? Or
that was Barclays Capital.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. I amazingly, not only did we work in Citgo, I also was in Barclays Capital as well. How did you find working there, Anthony?
They were a good bunch of lads. They were really, really good. Very committed, because obviously it was something that it wasn't universally accepted as something that they should do. This restructuring, changing the method of working, and so there was some reticence. So it was something that was, we'd have conversations of our little battles, and after work, we were based in Canary Wharf, as you were, and meet up after work with other people from other places and other consultants and other contractors. It was quite a good community of people,
Yeah, I thought I'm in line with you. I thought, look, that there was a serious work ethic there, and there was also a real, you had to bring your A game every day, and if you didn't bring it, you wouldn't be there very long, and it was a very good company to work for, and it felt like that they were making serious impacts, on business. So yeah, Barclays Capital, good company. And then what happened after that, Anthony?
So I think the major things after that, I worked for doing a SuccessFactors implementation for Value Retail, who were the people who own Bicester Village. They're one of the things that, as an Irish person, you'd recognise the name, but they had another 20 odd sites across the world, including Rodeo Drive, where boutiques come in, and they had a very particular way of it wasn't a flat rental. It was based on a rental plus a percentage of turnover. It's a very different kind of model, and so I worked there on their HR delivery of SuccessFactors for them. Got to the point where we delivered that quite successfully, and then I moved on to working at Fitch Ratings as a full-time employee, actually, director of business systems, implementing end-user computing. So that's taking stuff that was all manually driven, lots of Excel spreadsheets, and putting it all into system-based way of working. And that included things like the whole rating process was very menial and very laborious, and so the ratings teams were doing a huge amount of processing the same data and not really, 3 or 4 people doing the same kind of analysis and then discussing at the end what kind of rating they were going to make. That's not very efficient. And what we did was we moved towards a more efficient way, that we took a lot of the analysis out of the hands of the business, and we automated that reporting. So that reporting then came to the analysts, that they could then look at the results, look at curves of 25 years worth of data, for example, and actually say, well, actually, I can see that this and this, we'd compare things like the performance of the asset versus the unemployment or the GDP of the country, or whatever the markers for that particular business unit we're going to look at. And they got a graph that displayed, actually, when we look at unemployment, that leads what happens when unemployment goes down or up, that leads the performance of this mortgage-backed security, for example. So they could make judgment calls on whether something was trends were going towards getting your money back, or potentially being more risky kind of assets.
So Basically, I think it was what Anthony Todd does in various places. He takes noise and he makes music out of it.
That's very kind of you to say so. But yeah, it is looking through the chaos and trying to find another way of working and doing things.
I had thought of that word chaos, but I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to say it. But like, just for some people who mightn't realize, just, Fitch, it's a rating agency. Do you want to just briefly kind of explain what they do?
So Fitch, you'll have heard of Standard & Poor's and Moody's, and Fitch is number 3 globally of all the ratings agencies. So what they do is they advise investment companies and private individuals on the likelihood that they are of getting their money back on investment. And the rating that you see, AAA, AA, B, etc., that goes for companies and investments, but equally they also have a sovereigns, which tells you how good the rating is for a particular country. So when people during the crisis saw ratings for Ireland go down to a AA, down to a B, whatever it happens to be, that is done by ratings agencies. They look at the security or the overall stability of an economy, and the sovereigns department actually issue this kind of ratings. I worked for the finance part of things, so I worked on the investment funds and trading, so mortgage-backed securities, for things like financial instruments for commercial securities based on commercial mortgages or private mortgages, those kind of things. A little bit more volatile in the market, and they change a lot more quickly. And equally, we sort of developed far more intelligence over the time I was there by bringing in more statements from more places, bringing things in from the central bank and stuff like that. But we were also responsible for reporting to ESMA, which is European regulator, and the central bank on Spanish investments. So they're very particular, what you call MIC and non-MIC, which is the Spanish market has changed dramatically over the years, and there are long-term investments that the European government actually buy into to keep the stability of the various economies going. And so one of the things I did was actually build a reporting mechanism for that. So that made a lot more streamlined process internally to do what had to be done on a very regular basis. So every month we had to do these reports to the regulator,
Very good. So now you've landed somewhere, and I think it's for everybody in Ireland now. It's a very important entity, and based on where we're at. So, do you want to describe what you're doing at the moment and what type of a role it is?
It's probably the biggest SAP data migration in Europe at the moment. We're talking about working at the HSE, which is everybody's household name, as you say. 120,000 people work there approximately as regular employees. And working for the HSE, what we're trying to do is try to standardize all of the finance, pulling in all of the different systems. And we're talking this, at the last guess, it was about 200 systems we're talking about integrating into one finance system. And that's to be able to roll up to that global level, so that when when head of finance goes to the Oireachtas and says this is where the HSE stands, he's got information that's rolled up from all the little hospitals and all the larger hospitals, section 38, section 39s, bringing all that data up, and it bubbles up and crystallizes into something that makes a valuable report for senior finance to go to the Oireachtas and say, this is how we're doing. So it's pretty pivotal to the future of the HSE, and it's a big change. It's been a long time coming. This direction was sort of started in 2009. There was a paper that said we should standardize all this and bring it all together, and there's been lots of separate projects to stabilize parts of the business and to make things easier. But this is the big change. This is the seed change, where almost all the finance kind of things are impacted with this. It's not a reporting engine. It's going to be used to manage debt It's going to be managed to work out who the vendors are that are the ones that we have the biggest exposure to, and it was going to help us actually, drive contract management as well. So you can say, well, actually, if we get centralize all this buying of medicines, instead of having it through different mechanisms, we could save money. So it's to drive the change, will actually drive a saving for the HSE.
Well, I mean, I think that's a fabulous objective. I mean, the HSE is such an important entity in Ireland, based on what health and stuff like that. But having the information and being able to make informed decisions based on the quality of the information that you provide, that's very important. So you must be it must be very motivating to be going in every day and doing stuff like this, knowing that ultimately you could make a big difference.
Well, ultimately we can make it so that we're a bit more efficient, which means that every hospital gets medicine more promptly, or more within their budget. That debtors, or vendors, we can go through and we can actually make the best of the money that the HSE has. Yes, HSE is a very large spend because it looks after everybody. So ultimately, the way I look upon it is I'm supporting that, helping to change the way that works. It's actually something that gives me a little bit of a kick sometimes when I'm thinking, okay, yeah, it's hard now, but I can see that by the time these start rolling out, it's going to make a big difference. Because it's such a big change, it's very hard to show the long-term benefits for the short-term pain, relatively speaking. But it's something has been something that senior government members have approved, and this is something that's going to make a big difference in the long term.
Yeah, no, it's tremendous. I just think, fair play to you. There's members of my own family that are working in the HSE, I know that they work so hard, and it's a very tough job. So anything that does benefit the process, I'm sure is going to be very well received. So well done. I know you're a good guy. You wear your heart on your sleeve. So you put 100% into it. And that's really great to see. So look, I wanted to move on there, Anthony, and just basically ask you, look, how have you found contracting during COVID? What has your experience been like?
So I'll give you an idea. My first contract here was actually in a situation that 2 days before COVID, I picked up my laptop. And on that contract, I hadn't seen a single person while I was on that engagement. So yeah. I know it has a fundamental change the way that people work and the way that people are. It really does change the interactions with people. I found that things that helped were setting up a regular call over coffee, so people could drop in and say hello, and they would be able to catch up with me. So those kind of things really helped. But it's also really hard to connect with people on a human level, because no matter what you're doing, whether it's project management, data governance, whatever it happens to be, it's connecting with people on a human level that's the challenge in these days. It's fine if you already know people to some degree, that because you have something to build on. But when you're coming in as a contractor, that doesn't exist. So it's actually it's trying to find the time to have that little conversation about what you do on the weekend, or how's your family, and those kind of things, to find out what makes people tick, what enthuses them, what stresses them. Because equally, we need to support our colleagues, because without that support, we all start to wind down, and we find the stress of the day pulling on us. By getting mutual support, it means that you can stay motivated and you can stay productive, and therefore, because you're productive, you actually feel like you're doing something, which means you have a better interaction with other people. So it sort of builds a positive vibe around the team,
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think what you're doing and stuff that we work together, on together involves a lot of change management, right? So people are experiencing an external factor that's creating a lot of stress anyway with COVID, and then you're coming in and you're basically this shiny person who's going to like change things, and there's a bit of resistance. So as you know very well, what you do is, like, as I've seen the way you operate, is like you build a personal relationship with people because change is difficult and people want to it's not that they want to resist it, but it's a natural part of humanity that you kind of resist it. So getting to know people and getting to know them personally, like you can facilitate them working on the change if you know them, right?
Yeah, it certainly makes it easier. And it's not normally a case that people are just resistant. It's normally that they're a little bit starstruck by the fact that there's a big change going on and they don't know what it means to them. So when you try to build a personal connection, you can actually help them understand what it means to them, what it means to their team, what it means to their day-to-day life in the next 6 weeks or 6 months or whatever it is going to be delivered. And that's the bit then you start building an alliance rather than just here's this contractor, as you say, contractor coming in and telling us what to do. That's not the way that you get the best out of people. That's not the best way to be a contractor. You'll find that no matter where you are, there's always going to be a certain clash of what's the word, personalities sometimes, because you're coming in with a job to do that may upset the apple cart some places, but equally when you put it that it's actually a benefit for most people when you're going in to do these jobs, that dissipates after a while when they start to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, when you bring that you're not some kind of an ogre, that you're like a person as well, that you do, you have a life and you have a family and you have different things, it changes the dynamic, right? And it also lets people see, like when you build a relationship with people and look friendly with them, work friends can be slightly different to friends in your normal life. But like when a lot of like change management stuff like that is really down to personal relationships and the psychology of like working with people and understanding what are blockers for them. And really speaking, when you're working with somebody and you're in there to facilitate change, one thing that you have to help with people and maybe help them realize is like you're there to make things better for them, not to disrupt them and make their life worse. And if you're there to basically change a process to automate it, it's going to make their life better, not worse. And that's really part of what you try and do, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So like specifically in terms of coping with COVID, like for me, just to let you know, Anthony, obviously, I've got small kids, so going out for walks with them was a big thing and bringing them around the place and all that kind of stuff. But also from a personal point of view, I bought a spinning bike and I got kettlebell and I got resistor bands and I did try and do exercise a lot of mornings, do things like that. Or, I reinforced my my interest in sustainability and the environment and doing things like reusing things, even tea bags, coffee, all that kind of stuff, putting them in the garden, trying to reuse stuff rather than throwing it away, all that kind of stuff. And that, because COVID, it's like something like it's like a heavy cloud that goes down on you, and it's like, you're waiting for it to be over, but you're trying to be realistic and say, we just have to keep going, you know what I mean? When will it be over? So you need to have things that take your mind away from it. Like what have you been doing to do that? Because I know you have a lot of interests.
Yeah, so I have my guitar, which I play sort of moderately. I play it a lot, but I play it fairly poorly, so the neighbours no doubt would complain. But I just that's one of my first things. That's after work. Sometimes I'll pick up the guitar and just have a bit of a play or whatever. But like you, I also got a road bike, and I go out with my other half, my wife, and we go for cycle rides over the weekends especially. And then I've also sort of become more interested in my photography again. Although I'm sort of locked in and not able to go very far, there are still quite a few things, because where I am up in Malahide, it's not actually too far away from the beach and things. So I take quite a lot of photographs, and I've sort of allowed myself to slow down a wee bit and actually see things differently, and that helps, rather than always be frantically rushing, always be frantically trying to do this, that, and the other. You need to give yourself time to be able to decompress, whether that's lunchtime, go for a walk, which is what I sometimes do. I go for a walk from here and come back and have half an hour walk, at a brisk walk around the park, which isn't very far away. That helps, because obviously you're out in the fresh air, and it just gets the blood flowing a wee bit. But equally, you know, the beauty of being near the sea is going in for a dip or whatever it happens to be. It's great to just change your environment a wee bit, and change where you are. One of the things that made a huge difference was actually going from my single screen work screen to putting two big screens up. That made a massive difference for me, for the eye strain. Of looking at documents all day, as we said earlier on, looking at flow charts and Gantt charts and stuff like that. You know, when you're looking at it on something only this big, and you can look at it something on maybe this big, how much more relaxed you feel, rather than being hunched up. And you know, I've got to say that was a big advantage, is actually setting that up right in the first place, because it just takes that, when you're doing 8 hours sitting in your desk, have a proper office. Like, I know that you've got your office conversion done now, Kev, because you know that makes a big difference. Rather than, if it's at all possible, do that rather than having on the kitchen table.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, because I have the added challenge of having two small people who, you know, have no respect for my working day, and can just basically, they can gate crash any situation, and you know, they get involved in meetings with, you know, people, and it doesn't bother them. So coming in here into my safe space and being able to do a bit of work has been super, to be honest with you. And as you said there a while ago, like, I mean, having the ability to just sit and think, you know, as well, is good, and slowing down. But I mean, like, you shared some of your photographs, and they're actually really good. Like, I mean, I'm not just saying that. And I mean, it'd be one thing, you know, I think you should be sharing some more of that stuff, because it's very good. You've obviously taken time and considered what you want to actually take a photograph of, you know, which is good when you consider people are taking millions of photographs, and you know, most of them are just nonsense, you know.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's just like I do it for myself, but it was just ones that I shared with you because I really liked them. For all the ones that are good, there's probably half a dozen that are a lot less. But you know, those ones I'm particularly proud of. So yeah, I was happy to share them with you anyway.
No, that's good. I appreciate it. You know, so look, I mean, we're coming near the end, Anthony, of this conversation. But like, just a question, you know, because you know, obviously we're both interested in contracting and stuff like that, and it's something that probably doesn't get the right type of exposure. So I just wanted to get your thoughts about where you see contracting going, you know, in the short to medium term. Have you any insights or any thoughts about it? You know,
well, I'm certainly seeing with the change with the UK, with Brexit, and a lot of companies are at least looking at either having a base in Ireland or bases otherwise, you know, other places in Europe. You see more small, short-term, say around a year, strategic projects spinning up environments here, where they're building whole new office. Well, you know, less offices now because of COVID, but you know, like building a presence in Dublin, for example, which they didn't do before. And I'm seeing on the contract market, I'm seeing roles that are coming up now, which support that in all sorts of ways, whether that's technical guys, you know, working on databases and systems, or security. A lot of guys on security at the moment, a huge amount of increase in security, obviously because of remote working, and a lot of cloud-based things in order to support remote working for everybody. So those contract kind of roles are on the growth side of things. Equally, I'm seeing more management consulting sort of roles coming up, where they realise that they need to do, a company might realise they need to make a change, but they actually aren't well equipped to do that. So I'm seeing that both from the big four, but I'm also seeing that in small consultancies as well, where that's definitely a growth market at the moment. And I can see that increasing over the next year or two, especially after the impact of Brexit and the post-COVID world, whatever that's going to look like. That's going to change the way that we will work long term. So that's going to be an interesting time for everybody. There's going to be a huge amount of change, but obviously that's what contractors are there for, to help that change for various people and various teams. So the contract market, I reckon, is going to be fairly buoyant in the next couple of years at least.
Something, the stuff you're saying is like really resonant. You're hitting like major points there. I hear quite a lot about IR35, and the concerning thing is there's a lack of understanding of IR35, and if you get it wrong, it is not a good situation, in terms of the penalties and what it can mean. And there are some people talking about IR35, and I'm not quite sure that they have the level of understanding to really be communicating about it. And I think that it really is a subject that you really, really, really need to research thoroughly and be able to know exactly about it, because it's had a big impact, and it's going to have a very big impact over the next 12 months. What do you think about that statement?
Yeah, I think, Kev, that you're right in that statement. I mean, when we had the UK government, HMRC, change the legislation around concealed employment and went and did a clawback over almost 10 years, it had a huge impact on a lot of contractors. And a lot of them ended up with very large bills for work. But equally, cleaners, people like that, were also impacted, because the contract management way that they looked upon contracts changed entirely. And I think it's also going to be the same with IR35. The IR35, we've only just sort of touched the tip of the iceberg at this moment in time. There's going to be the impact of that once these other loopholes have been closed properly and revenue's been taken out of those positions. Then the IR35 will be the next thing that HMRC concentrate on. And indeed, what they're doing is they're making the employer responsible to recover if there's any doubt, making them responsible. So the employer is then responsible for the employer's based national insurance and paying those other debts. And that's obviously, as you say, that obviously impacts the employer side, never mind the contractor side. So there's a huge amount of change that really people haven't got their head around yet.
Yeah, and I mean, also some of your comments there about like security and security positions and information security and managing information security around with the challenges of remote working, right? They are big things that are going to continue to grow, right, in the contracting space.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, it's not just information security as in system security. You still have GDPR is still taking its impact as companies may be slow to evolve and take that into account, but GDPR needs to be considered as part of remote working as well, in that, should this person have access to this information, well, how do you actually prevent that person seeing that information remotely when they need other parts of that information for their job? So that's the other kind of stuff where the impact of GDPR has something that is hasn't really taken full effect yet, even though it's been in legislation for 10 years. It's now starting to make change. Yeah,
my final question, Shay, is like something a little bit different, but just to get your thoughts. Everybody's moved to the cloud and everybody's moved to the big tech cloud providers. But I have been hearing quite a lot, and because of your position, you may have like insights into it or thoughts. People are now probably looking at it from the point of view, it's like the centralized versus decentralized kind of conversation in terms of companies, like national companies. That cloud provision and having all your stuff on some effectively on somebody else's server in a data center. Some people are now saying that maybe they've probably gone a bit too far with it, and maybe they should actually bring some of the stuff back in-house. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think that's really a concern, or do you think it's, or is it just maybe something that's an anxiety that shouldn't be there?
So you have those kind of cases where it's a good question. I think it's related more to the concept of security, and how we judge security. It's in the cloud, but ultimately, people want things to be secure in a way that is secure but manageable and looked after by them, whether that's in a filing cabinet like you would do with, say, the military intelligence and intelligence units that have moved back towards paper systems because of their, they can't be penetrated by a hacker. So that it's one of these situations where it's in flux at the moment. It's certainly, you see now that from a cost point of view, people are less exposed to a single cloud provider. They sort of split up their provision across multiple providers. So they're not in a situation where they can be held to ransom by a particular provider and go, well, actually, thank you for joining us for another year. Your bill has just gone up by 12%, and then they have to be in a situation where they have to take that. By spreading their exposure across multiple technologies and multiple platforms, it means that they have the ability to go, well, actually, there's a bartering here. If we put up the price too much or we change terms and conditions too much, we may lose this customer because they can literally switch because they already have infrastructure in another environment.
Yes.
So that's it's all to play for at the moment, though. I think there is a lot of concern about hackers because we're all remote, and it's obviously exposed some companies to more potential bad actors than it would have done before. And as we continue in this remote world, that's going to be a case where security has to be, certainly external, like a shell for security to access your systems and your data has to be something that's very strong and considered very seriously.
Yeah. Well, Anthony, that's a really great insight, and but just our time is up now, and I just wanted to thank you for your time today, and it's been extremely interesting, and I hope that people who are watching find it equally as interesting as I do. We could talk for hours, and the great thing about talking to Anthony is, like, if I don't talk to you for 2 years and we talk, it's like I talked to you yesterday, which is also a very good sign of a person.
Yeah, and we built up a very good understanding over the years, and curries and stuff like that we had when we were at Sitco. I lost time when and playing rugby together. Don't forget as well the amount of times you saved my ass on the rugby field over the years.
Well, thanks for saying that. That's very kind of you. But yeah, look, I mean, I really hope that people would take some of your insights there, because, like, you really know what you're talking about. What you do is a skill set. It's like my father would say. It's like hen's teeth. There's just not that many people who really know what they're doing in your space, So I think, like, what you're doing at the moment is a fabulous thing to do, like, even on a human level, helping the HSE and stuff like that, and making a difference. So, like, the future is bright for Anthony Todd, I think.
Well, we can live in hope. That's all I can say, and just carry on regardless. Thank you very much for inviting us for the call. It's good to speak to you.
All right, thanks, Anthony. Thank you.